Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Diversity in DC webinar. I'd like to welcome our speakers today. We have Sharon Bellingham from Scottish Widows, Khalid Iqbal from MAN Group, and Charlotte Whitehead from our Gowling Pensions team. I'm Elaine Hiles, and I'll be chairing today's webinar. I'm a senior associate here in the Gowling Pensions team. Now, before we kick off, just a few housekeeping things to cover. You're very welcome, and we encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar, but if you could do so using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens rather than the chat box, that would be great. We'll be picking up the questions at the end of each speaker's session, and if there's time at the end of the webinar, we'll pick up some further questions then. If we do run over, we'll respond to any questions we haven't got around to at the end of after today's webinar. Just a reminder that if you'd like to view the slides side by side, you can do this by clicking in the View Options tab at the top of your screens, and you then select View Option and then selecting Side by Side View. We will be sending around a feedback survey at the end of the webinar. We just find this useful to help us plan and prepare our future webinars. So if you could take a few moments to complete that, that would be great. And finally, we're recording today's webinar, and after the webinar, the recording and the slides will be available online. So that's the boring house stuff out of the way. So now on to the subject of today's webinar, diversity in DC. When we talk about diversity in DC, we're talking about a really broad thing. It's much bigger than just gender, age, or race. It's including things like diversity of background, of personality, of experience, and diversity of ways of thinking. So it's really broad, and it's really important. And the reason it's really important is because there's been lots of evidence and research that shows better and more diverse teams make better or tend to make better decisions and tend to achieve better financial outcomes. And ultimately, this results in better outcomes for members, which is really at the core of the drive behind improving and encouraging diversity within DC and within pensions. Industry bodies like the Pensions Regulator, the PPF, and the FCA are all now engaging with this area in a meaningful way. At Gowling, we have our own Pensions Diversity Forum, which was formed in the last year, and this looks both at diversity and inclusion in the context of pensions, but also aims to generally raise awareness of diversity and inclusion issues within the team more generally. Today's webinar is going to look at a few issues in more detail that are relevant to diversity in pensions. Sharon is going to speak about the gender pension gap and what we mean by this and what we can do about it. Charlotte is going to offer us the Gen Z perspective and their views on pensions and savings and how to engage with Gen Z. And Khalid is then going to take us through how the industry has changed over the past 40 years and what still needs to happen and what are the barriers to future change. So I will now hand over to Sharon, who's going to kick off with the gender pension gap.
Thanks very much for that warm introduction, Elaine, and also thanks very much for inviting me along today to come and talk to you about something that many of us are interested in and equally passionate about, obviously in equal measure. And I'm Sharon Bellingham, Scottish Widows Master Trust Lead, and really delighted to be here on behalf of Scottish Widows. And we now have 16 years worth of research and reporting under our belts, and I'm just going to spend a little bit of time this morning over the next 10 minutes or so talking through some of those key points from our very most recent findings. And as a frazzled mum of 3 who has had a fair bit of time away from work over the years, I can directly relate to a lot of what I'm going to share from our research. And I'm not here to preach to anyone. I very much have my own gender pension gap to fill, and I can really fully appreciate why women actually push their own savings down the list of priorities, when we're all busy raising a family, ferrying kids around, and trying not to be too distracted by the school mums WhatsApp group. There's also a case to think about that many of us may be sandwich caring. And that's really used to describe those of us who care for older relatives and also have dependent children. And that's really driven by a combination of life expectancy, longer life expectancy, and women like myself that have had children later on in life. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the pandemic. I think I'm starting to recover from the horror of homeschool, but on a more serious note, we can see that the impact that this has had, and I think will continue to have, on the gender pension gap. And we have some thoughts on the levers that we might be able to pull to further improve the position. And I think as a mum of two boys and a daughter, it does seem incredibly unfair that Hannah is immediately at a disadvantage, it seems, versus her brothers through no fault of her own, really. So in true Chris Whitty slide, I wonder if I can have the next slide, please, Richard. Thank you. And I guess to start, there is some good news. This visual just frames where we are, where we've come from, and it provides a really neat snapshot of the progress that we've made. We are seeing more women than ever saving adequately, and we define adequate savings at Scottish Widows as 12% of salary. So we can see here that the gap between men and women is only 1%, with 59% of women saving adequately. And you can see that historically the number has jumped around between the 40 to 50% mark. So really super progress, and it's also super to see how things have improved over time. And I guess it's a reflection of both policy and education, and that they are working. So if I can have the next slide, please, Richard. So just to temper the good news, whilst we can see that women are indeed saving more than before, the reality actually is that women are saving substantially less than men. And we do see inequalities in certain cohorts. So for example, younger women who we class as those between age 22 and 29, only 46% save adequately. And we also see some regional variances as well. Another point to consider is the impact that the differences in average salary means. And as the slide highlights, women are saving on average £1,300 less a year than their male counterparts. And there are many reasons why women earn less, but clearly two of the biggest are part-time working and that lower average salary, apologies. So if I can have the next slide, please. And just thinking about some of those structural inequalities, we know that 3/4 of part-time workers are women. We know that women are paid less than men, and that's often due to the sectors that women work in. And these two things can actually lead to a whopping almost £11,000 difference in the average salary. And when you roll that forward to what that means in retirement, taking account assumptions for investment returns and career breaks and part-time working, by our calculations, women currently in their 20s will retire with a pension worth on average approximately £100,000 less than that of a man of the same age. And just to think about it a different way, to have the same size of savings at retirement, a woman would have to work on until she's 102. And granted, the life expectancy for a young person could now reach 100. I guess the question is, would anyone really want to work into old age? And as I said before, for me, I have my own catching up to do, but it's really hard not to reflect on my daughter and the outlook that she has relative to her little brothers, but with the same education and opportunity. So could I have the next? So we're on a fragile recovery. Thank you. And just thinking about COVID, clearly significant for everyone. Many of us have been touched, whether it's our health, our financial position, whether it's us, our family, our friends. And just to highlight the role that women had played through the pandemic, almost half of employed women do have critical worker status, and that's versus 39% of employed men. And just thinking about the NHS, over 3/4 of the workforce are women. Plus, the survey says actually that women have been carrying out, on average, 2/3 more childcare duties than men since the beginning of lockdown. I mean, I would argue that, and I think in this house it's considerably more, but hopefully my husband isn't in the audience to hear that. And women are also more likely to work in sectors which have been furloughed. So those sectors being retail, arts, hospitality. And we can see that over 50% of those furloughed from the hospitality sector were women. And just adding to this, just over a third of women under 25 work in these so-called shutdown sectors. And there is that high proportion of furloughed female and part-time workers. And just thinking about that, younger women have been very heavily impacted with 49% of 25s, under 25s being furloughed. And I think it's clear that the pandemic has increased the challenge that women in their 20s currently face. And the health impact on ethnic minority groups is clear. However, a point to consider as well is how many ethnic minority groups are also paid less, an hourly difference of 28%. Equally, our 2020 research highlighted that a third of self-employed women had no retirement provision, and we've seen during the pandemic less women eligible for the self-employed income support scheme than men to help them through COVID. And finally, women are far more likely to take on the additional caring responsibilities during the COVID pandemic, and with really little notice, all those additional responsibilities have come in for parents, so childcare, teaching at home, and evidence reflects that mums in particular have been impacted and are 1.5 more times more likely to have either lost their jobs or quit than the fathers. And I think these situations are really real, and whilst we can see the great progress that we've made, it does flag some of the structural inequalities in women's earning and the impacts that this has had, which is very stark for many. And if we could move to the next slide, please. So we at Scottish Widows, we have a number of really interesting real life case studies that we've taken from the research, and this is just one of them. So if we just look at Amira's experiences and where she finds herself, and she has experienced significant uncertainty during the pandemic. She's currently on maternity leave, receiving statutory pay. She's split from her partner and is now living with her parents, and indeed her dad has been made redundant due to the pandemic, and this leaves her to be the only member of the household with an income, and she has children to care for, and her current financial uncertainty, she actually wants to access the money in her pension now, not in 30 years time. And it's not just about Amira's personal financial difficulties. Obviously it has impacts on her parents, on obviously her child's financial security as well, and we see that household savings are being severely squeezed for those hardest hit by the pandemic, and actually further widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And clearly Amira doesn't see retirement as an immediate financial priority, which is totally understandable. Next slide, please. So how do we make a difference? I think if we think about the prevailing pension system in the UK, really the foundations were laid at a time when the roles of men and women were actually quite different. And typically at the time, men went to work, women stayed at home with the family, there was less divorce, fewer unmarried couples, and also fewer single parent families. We also need to think about the shifting pension policy landscape, the decline in defined benefit schemes, and also we're familiar with the introduction of auto enrolment. And there's also changing social trends. It's likely that more of us have more caring responsibilities, and many of us are having children later on. And it's certainly not a simple case of just telling women to save more into their pension. There are some significant affordability barriers to consider, but we do think there are some policy changes that would help, some levers that could be pulled, for example. So things like automatically including pension and divorce assets. Our research reveals that almost half of women have no idea what happens to pensions when couples get divorced, and it's also interesting to consider whether what protections could be introduced for unmarried couples. Also enhanced maternity provisions to help pension payments, keep pension payments at pre-maternity leave levels throughout maternity leave. And also we believe that the evolution of AE will will be bringing more people into savings. And we believe that 12% of pensions is adequate, but 15% really is needed to be more comfortable. And we'd really like these contributions to be increased to this level, with employers continue to pay even when members opt out. And just on the subject of auto enrolment, you know, that mechanism for the self-employed, and that would make a big difference. And to support younger women, we believe that lowering the minimum age to 18 will help their long-term savings. And also we would like to see the earnings threshold scrapped to bring in part-time workers. And I think this would help a significant amount of women within a short space of time, and really support their long-term savings. And as well as some of these fundamental changes, as education and engagement can really help. And I guess how many of us were actually thinking about our retirement income in our early 20s. And notwithstanding the engagement challenge that a lot of us grapple with, knowledge is key, and a lack of knowledge is in our findings one of the main reasons why many women do not really want to engage with their retirement planning. So thinking about target communications, helping women appreciate the importance of regular savings, and also being able to recognise that the right level of contributions required to fund a comfortable retirement. And that just takes us to our final slide, Richard. So just conscious that I've only really scratched the surface there. We've got many, many years of research. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. If you're interested in understanding more, really encourage you to seek out our reports and take a look at our hub. And we've got lots of great content on there, and lots of really interesting case studies as well. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Sharon. That was really interesting, and some really interesting statistics as well. We have had a question, or we've had a few questions through. So I'll put one to you now, and maybe we can pick the rest up at the end if there's time. So someone has asked, do you think that sidecar savings or increased flexibilities in accessing pension benefits could play a part in supporting the gender pension gap?
Yes, I do is the short answer, and I think it has wider appeal too, not clearly just not for women, but if we think about it in the context of the gender pension gap specifically, our research showed that some women are put off from saving for retirement due to the inaccessibility point. It's a real issue for many, and many women want to know that they have the ability to access money in case of emergencies, particularly those in the younger age bracket as well, which isn't surprising. So I think it would be a positive step to bring in greater flexibility into pension products, and also, you know, the sidecar savings is a neat solution as well in terms of help kicking off that savings culture. And I know that Nest Insights have been running a pilot initiative, and I think the results have so far proved incredibly positive.
Great, thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to hand over now to Charlotte, who's going to offer us a fresh perspective on diversity in DC.
Hi everyone. So as Elaine's mentioned, my name's Charlotte, and I'm a newly qualified solicitor in the pensions team at Gowling. So today I wanted to talk briefly about my experience about saving for a pension as a young person, and the ways in which the industry can engage young people to save. So I didn't really know anything about pensions before starting my training seat in the pensions team as a trainee solicitor. Now, I can appreciate that pensions is now such a large industry, and there are so many engaging and varied issues which all of us in the pensions world deal with and think about on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, I really enjoyed my time as a trainee in the team and wanted to qualify into this area of law. And I'd like to think that this shows that pensions issues can be really interesting and engaging to young people like me. It was during my training seat that I got involved with Gowling's Pensions Governance Committee, which I'm still part of today. Now, the aim of having you on the committee is to represent young employees of the firm so that we can increase the engagement of younger people with their pensions, which I think is really important and interesting. Before working in pensions, I wasn't even aware that young people weren't saving enough into their pensions, which I think probably highlights that there is a problem. So I've set out on this slide a couple of statistics which highlight the problem of getting young people to save. So you can see that a quarter of people under the age of 35 have no pension savings at all, and around half of 22 to 29-year-olds aren't saving enough for a retirement above the poverty line. Now, I don't think the findings of this research is that surprising. I'm 25, and even though I am a pension solicitor and I deal and think about pensions every day, I find it really hard to visualize myself as a pensioner. And I think this means it's hard to feel motivated to put money away when it feels as though there are so many other more immediate priorities. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thanks. So I think a lot of people of my age feel similarly, in that our biggest savings priority is to get onto the property ladder and save for our house deposit. These days, the average age for buying a house is getting older, currently around the age of 34. And so pension saving is probably just going to get pushed further and further down younger people's priority lists. There are also young people who might just not think that they're in a position to think about saving at all. For example, those who may be self-employed, who have faced financial difficulties as a result of COVID, or who perhaps work in the gig economy. Now, the pensions regulator recently published a strategy paper called Pensions for the Future. And this noted that one of the key areas of focus for millennial savers is to increase participation in workplace pensions. From reflecting on my experience as a young person, as well as discussions that we've had on the governance committee, I thought I'd run through a few ways to help engage young employees and members with their pensions. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. Thanks. So firstly, I don't think that young people view the pensions industry as being quite as tech savvy as other industries, such as banks. I think young people want to do things as quickly as possible with as little effort as possible. These days, paying bills, checking balances and so on can all be done via apps on our phones. For example, just to make a payment into my savings account, all I need to do is hover my thumb over my iPhone and it's done for me, and I don't even need to enter a password. In contrast, I just don't think that many young people even know how to view their pension pot online or how to go about increasing their contributions. Pensions literature is often sent by post, but these days young people just don't really engage with posts that's sent to them, especially as lots of people in their 20s might be living in rented accommodation and move around a lot. So I think it's key for pension providers and employers to be innovative in their use of technology to help engage young people with their pensions. It's common for young people at the beginning of their careers to change jobs often, and short-term or flexible employment contracts are becoming so much more common. And I think this means that young people might end up with a number of small savings pots, which they just aren't keeping on top of. Without easy online access to view your pension pot online, I just don't think young savers will keep track of their savings and will probably just forget all about their pension. So ultimately, I think it'll be really hard to successfully engage a new generation of savers without accessible online access to their pensions. Now, as part of my role on the governance committee, I collated the thoughts of the trainee solicitors at Gowling to gauge their views on pensions. Now, the general view was that they thought that they probably had a pension, but had no idea how much they were contributing or knew really what a pension was. And I just can't see how young people can engage with their pensions when they don't actually know what one is. This has been echoed by the pensions regulator, who've said that their research has shown that the majority of millennials feel that they just don't know enough about pensions to make suitable choices. Perhaps as an example, a lot of young employees probably don't appreciate the free money element that they get in the form of employer contributions and tax relief. So this could lead some young people who aren't saving into a pension to miss out on this massive financial help. So I think it's crucial for providers or employers to provide basic information about pensions to young savers in an accessible way. Having an understanding of pensions is so important in order to make informed choices about pension saving. I also think that young people communicate very differently to pensioners, and as a result, this should mean that providers and employers need to adjust their tone and messaging accordingly. Pensioners, or those who are nearing retirement, are more likely to be educated about pensions because they have that active interest in their savings. Maybe they're more likely to read pensions literature that's sent to them, or that they want to speak to a customer service assistant on the phone and have a conversation about their savings. However, young people are probably more likely to be engaged when they're presented with just clear and simple information that's relevant to them. Receiving a big booklet in the post, setting out your annual benefit statement, which is filled with lots of jargon, can feel overwhelming and sometimes inaccessible. I also think that young people perhaps could be interested to learn about where their money is being invested. Learning about ESG issues is an area that I've found really interesting and topical. And my generation is very alive to environmental change and social justice issues. And so talking about green investing and ESG investments might help to engage young savers with their pensions, both because they find the topic interesting and because they want to make sure that their pension fund is investing ethically. I also think that young people probably need to be given a bit of a reality check about their future retirement prospects. As I've mentioned, as a young saver, it's really hard to envisage how much you need for a lifestyle that's 40 years away. The regulator's Pensions for the Future paper noted that whilst automatic enrolment is having a significant impact on millennials, these savers will typically make their statutory minimum level of contributions, and their more erratic employment patterns and varied contract types could make ongoing pension saving a challenge. Now, I think that a lot of young savers probably operate on a misguided assumption that if they meet the minimum level of contributions through automatic enrolment, then that's enough. To combat this, using resources such as the PLSA retirement living standards could work as a good conversation starter for getting young people engaged. Research conducted by the BI team and Scottish Widows discovered that labelling can make a difference too. So this is where members are told that their contributions at a certain percentage would keep them above the poverty level at retirement, whereas a higher contribution would put them at a more comfortable lifestyle. I think this is a helpful and accessible way to help young people think about how much they need to save, making it clear that now is a really good time to start saving, and that saving as early as possible is really important, are key messages to spread. I just think that many young people probably haven't given any real thought to their future retirement. And so just prompting them to think about the future is helpful. So I hope it's been helpful to hear the experiences of a younger person saving for retirement. To sum up, I think there are lots of opportunities to engage younger people to help them save. Thinking about the perspectives of different types of savers is really important. At the end of the day, young people just aren't going to make the first move. And so providers and employers need to give real thought to how they approach their relationship with their younger members and employees. This could involve thinking about your strategy towards using technology innovatively, or perhaps making smaller nudges to those who fall into this younger age bracket. And without taking action, I think there is a real risk that there could be a whole generation of savers who will be living in blissful ignorance until it's too late. So I think that was everything I wanted to talk about. So I'll hand back to you, Elaine.
Great, thank you very much, Charlotte. There was some really interesting food for thought there. We have had some questions through. Here we go. How can we combat the impact of the pandemic on young people's ability to save?
Yeah, so I think that now's a really good opportunity to approach young people. There might have been a group of young people at the beginning of the pandemic who could have reduced or stopped their contributions because they're worried about the impact of the pandemic on their financial position. And so prompting young people now to think about their pension saving could be a really good time when people might be feeling a little bit more confident. I also think that the pandemic's impacted people in different ways. So obviously there are those who have been really severely financially affected by the pandemic. But I think there are also a lot of young people who have kept their full-time job during all the lockdowns, and they might have temporarily moved back to their parents' house and have definitely decreased their outgoing substantially. And so they might be sitting on quite a lot of savings at the moment. And so I think now, prompting young people to think about pension savings when they might actually be in a good position to do so is a really good time. I also think that the pandemic has been a really big marker in people's lives and given the impact on people's finances. I think it shows the importance of saving for the future. So spreading that message, I think, is really important.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to pass over now to Khaled. who is going to offer us his views and tell us a bit about the industry that he's been working in for a long time. So over to you, Khaled. I think you might be on mute, Khaled. There we go. That should be good now.
Thank you very much, Elaine. And thank you for Gowling for giving me this platform to just talk about my experiences that I've had over the last 40 years or so. Well, I'd say about 30-ish years, because 10 years were spent in another industry. So I just wanted to take you through my career first, just so you have an idea of where I've been. I started as a research biologist, specializing in genetics with BP, and then transferred to BP Pensions, where I trained in BP Pensions department. And since then, I've been in pensions from 1982 onwards. The companies that I worked for: British Petroleum, British Olivetti Limited, Cargill PLC, head of pensions for London Borough of Hackney, BBC Pension Fund, and Johnson Controls Group, who I retired out of. Interestingly, when I joined BP Research in all those years ago, there were 3,500 people working there, and there were only 3 ethnic minority workers among the 3,500 people, me being one of them. And the research center, which was at Sunbury-on-Thames, is surrounded by 3 boroughs which have large immigrant populations. So I would let you draw your own conclusions about that. Most of these companies I worked for was as pensions manager, corporate pensions manager, and had mainly local white gray suited men in charge of pensions. Interestingly, I interviewed over a number of companies during my career and went through some grueling selection processes to be told that I'd been selected, only that they needed the approval from either the board or the chairman of the trustees, and only for them to come back with strange excuses like I didn't speak 3 or 4 European languages and that kind of thing. So there have been some bad experiences. Interestingly, it was easier to get a job with American companies than with British companies for some reason. So could I have the next slide, please? So once I retired, I fell into some contract work, and that work has been unrelenting for some reason. And so I worked for the Freudenberg Group, which is a German group, Aluminium Company of America, TUI Travel PLC, where I was supporting the Thomson Airways pensions trustees, Accenture Group PLC, and for the last 6 years, I've been at MAN Group, which is part of the VW Group. Now, interestingly, my experience has been more valued in post-retirement than it was at the time when I was working as a career. And it's less issues of authenticity or age. In retirement, they seem to want somebody with a relevant experience, and so and they're not very ageist, and it's a bit of a contrast. Whereas during my career, I also had an ageist problem with some of the companies. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've had some very good experiences where I've had introduced to people by people in pensions, where they've taught me lots of stuff because I'm coming from a scientific background. I had a hell of a lot to catch up from the Act, so from the 1921 Act onwards. So I had lots of helps, but there were also, as I said, a lot of negative experiences, which sort of stopped me getting the jobs that I really wanted to do and the challenges I wanted to have. And as I said, there was the experience of age discrimination, where one company thought because my daughter was at university, I'm probably too old for them to consider. I'm not sure why they did that. And my experience since retiring, as I said, has been fantastic, and there have been no such barriers. Next slide, please. Now, the first time I attended my a NAPF conference was in 1985, and I seemed to be the only person of color at that conference, and I remember it like yesterday at Harrogate. And they were only 3 women holding any kind of position in pensions at that. And that, I'm glad to say, has changed a lot, but not much has changed consequently in terms of ethnic minorities being given positions of corporate responsibility, particularly on the pension side. And you can see this, that I've had invites from many investment companies and law companies and briefings and lunches, only to find myself as being the only ethnic minority face there, and I don't believe this has changed that much. I once challenged a friend who worked at a top pensions consulting company to see if he could find a dozen pensions managers in the NAPF book, the old NAPF book, and he struggled to find more than a few. So there has been a shift over time, but is that enough? There are many fundamental changes required by those in recruitment and individuals in the industry. Unconscious bias training, I believe, would be really beneficial throughout the organizations. We would like to have more role models to promote and encourage a wider selection of society to consider careers in pensions, because pensions isn't something somebody sits down one day and says, I'd like to be a pensions manager, because it's not something people consider in that way. So we need to have role models who can go forward and show that there are careers to be made here. And the use of mentorship programs to help those already within the industry to progress further. There are still far too many BAME individuals in managerial and directorship positions within the industry, both on the client side and within the consulting firms. So I think if we do some of those things, then we should be able to have more ethnic minorities come into the pensions business, and I think we'll be richer for it. I think that's it really for me. Thank you for listening.
Great, thanks very much, Khaled. We have got a few questions through here for you.
Oh my God.
Just before I get going, just to remind you all, if you'd like to ask any questions, please do so using the Q&A function just at the bottom of your screens. So Khaled, the question we've got here for you is, what is the one action that could be taken to encourage greater diversity in the pensions industry?
I think just if we could go back to the earlier slide. So unconscious bias training would be it will be a massive help, I think, coupled with the use of mentorship programs. But the problem is that the problem isn't downstream. the problem is that at directorship level, a lot of jobs, at least in my experience, a lot of recruitment of me was stopped at a much higher level, and until the mixture of the boards changes, I think it is very difficult, but everybody should be put through unconscious bias training, I believe.
Great, thank you very much, Khaled. I'll just go back now and pick up on some of the other questions that have come through while our speakers have been speaking. I think we've got one here for you, Sharon. So somebody has asked, aside from increasing contribution levels, what do you see the role of employers as being in supporting the gender pension gap?
I guess a big part of that is highlighting the ongoing importance of savings, and I think that can be done by targeted communications and helping women understand what their pension pot will actually provide and what it means. And I think many of us, employers, members, as individuals as well, we're kind of maybe lulled into a false sense of security and perhaps don't fully appreciate what the contributions that are being paid in might actually equate to, and often it's not enough going in to meet those expectations. I think as well, from an employer perspective, it's about offering a good quality pension vehicle which provides real value for members. And that's not just about rock bottom pricing, but it's about engagement tools. It's about that kind of wider holistic support that a lot of pension arrangements can now support. Are there any other savings vehicles that can be used alongside the pension as well to support needs? Perhaps employers could offer flexibility on the benefits package, and subject to meeting sort of the minimal to enrolment requirements, members can, or individuals and employees can just use a spend elsewhere and direct to sort of shorter term savings in other ways. And I guess as well, one of the big things is offering flexible working policies, and that might mean that women can work full-time rather than part-time, things like compressed hours, for example. And I think the pandemic has really shown us the art of the possible, certainly when it comes from working from home. So I think lots of lessons to be learned from the pandemic as well.
Great, thanks very much, Sharon. We've had a few more questions come through. So Khaled, I think there's another one for you here. Somebody has asked, what can pension schemes do now to engage more effectively with ethnic minority members?
Okay, so I think with ethnic minority members, I think the older generation is the one that doesn't understand pensions that well. But they're mostly coming up to retirement, and if they've saved, and if they haven't, then it's a different ball game. But in terms of the youngsters, I think comms is key, and again, as Charlotte said, at MAN we are targeting youngsters, doing specific communications for youngsters. So whether they're from ethnic minorities or from from the indigenous people, I think the problems are very similar in that they need clear understanding of what pensions means, etc., and whether they have a way of saving, and they've got this free money. And at MAN I've gone one step further, which is to set up a process where people can access the company's contributions, which they can't afford to have in their pension fund because they can't afford to pay matching contributions. but they are allowed to have the extra contributions put into a lifeboat type fund after NI. I mean, they're not NI and a tax, and it can go into their lifeboat fund, which they can then access. So we tend to try and bring that into that, trying to engage the youngsters using those tools, so that they do get this extra money, so the company doesn't just add it to its bottom line.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Khaled. We've got another question here, which is along similar lines. I think maybe Charlotte, this is one for you. So there's a question of how can we encourage millennials to save into their pensions when they may also be saving for milestones such as buying a house or starting a family?
Yeah, I think there's probably an assumption with younger people that they say, they want to get married, they want to buy a house, maybe start a family, and that they have big savings goals to achieve those big life milestone events, and that they will think about retirement after they've gone through that process. And I think, as we've already discussed, really, that this all stems from a lack of understanding that a lot of young people just don't quite appreciate how early people need to start saving and how much they need to start saving. And a lot of young people just think that it's something they can think about maybe when they're in their later 30s. So I think that the pensions industry really needs to make clear to younger people that pensions saving is something you need to start thinking about earlier rather than later in life, and that it's something that has to be factored into your other savings goals. So it's something that sort of needs to be saved for throughout life, starting as soon as you start work, really. But again, I just don't think young people will really appreciate that point until they've been educated and they sort of have that reality check and understanding of how much they need to save for retirement.
Great, thank you. Khaled, there's another one for you here, a topical one. So someone has mentioned the recent government report on racism and suggested that said that the recent report dismissed unconscious bias training. I think you suggested unconscious bias training would be helpful. So the question is, has the government got it wrong, and what are your views on this?
Yeah, this is definitely very topical. It's been very topical in my own house, as my daughter is a lawyer, and so so she's been talking about this, and she's works in pensions, and we believe that I don't think all the views have been taken into account, and there seems to be certainly reading The Guardian and also from our own personal experiences, I would say that the report has been rewritten to reflect the government's view, because they don't want to have to deal with another thing, because of the pandemic or whether they don't believe it. But it's absolutely not. A lot of his findings don't really ring true. I mean, yeah, you talk to different people, and I just can't believe that they've come up with this conclusion. And in fact, I believe the chairman of the committee has actually said they weren't shown the report before it was published. So it's I think they need to go back to the drawing board, personally.
Yeah, thank you, Khaled. There's another question here. I'm not sure who's best placed to answer this, so you can shout for it. Someone has asked, how early should pensions education start? Should we be targeting young people whilst they are still at school, or does that run the risk of disengaging young people early on?
I think that pensions education should start at school. I think that there's probably not even just about pensions, really. I think there's just a general lack of understanding about, financial saving. I think that young people just don't really think about it. They might think about, oh, okay, I roughly know what a mortgage is, but not really know much more than that. And I think younger people will think about pensions, they'll just think, oh, pensioners, when, you know, I'll come to that when I'm 65. So I think that young people definitely, I think the earlier it's possible is really important. So they just realize that pension saving is just part of life.
Yeah, I'd support that as well. I have this conversation with my children, and you know, what are you doing at school? As I'm sure other parents do. And I think because we work in pensions and have a bit of an idea about financial matters, it's quite staggering actually that they don't sort of cover this in school. You know, my 9-year-old sort of often puts it, you know, he needs to know how to pay for life, because they have really no clue whatsoever. So yeah, I'd really endorse as early as possible, but in obviously the right way.
Elaine, I think there needs to be a module in secondary school, and I've supported that a long time. And at one stage, I thought maybe I could see if I could just go and talk to people at a local secondary school, but actually never had the time. Is to have a module which just shows budgeting, how you deal with that, how you deal with basic finances, because that's one of the things that we're doing through through at the communication end at MAN, is actually having comms where young people think, actually, I don't have any money left over, therefore I can't join the pension fund, and it's because they haven't budgeted, they haven't done these things properly, only to see actually the cost of a point gives me this much money from the company, you know, this kind of thing. So so definitely, I think it needs to, budgeting is a big issue, even when we have, because we get loads of 18, 19-year-old apprentices who join us. And of course, they're not required to auto-enroll, but some of them do. Once you've spoken to them, they will join at the low level of the scheme, and it's really important that youngsters learn how to budget.
Yeah, I agree, Khaled, and I agree with everything you've all just said. Thank you. Another question through here, which I think is, again, I'll open up to all three of you. Someone has asked, do you think the PLSA living standards are helpful in illustrating what pension saving you need? Is the minimum even out of reach for most people, or are they a good starting point?
I think, Elaine, I think it's a good starting point. We're doing a series of seminars in a couple of weeks' time, webinars, and part of what Charlotte was saying, one of the things we're doing to engage youngsters is launching an app that they can go and check their account and see how much money is in it and all this kind of stuff, to try and fire them up a bit. So definitely, I think it is something that I think would be a good idea.
I think as well, it's
carry on.
I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely endorse that. It's a step in the right direction. I think where we are now is by no means the finished article, but it is very much a step in the right direction, and perhaps bringing to life in a different way, different to perhaps how we've approached it in the past. You know, the annual benefit statement, which just tends to go in everyone's top drawer and isn't really that useful as a tool in answering a lot of the questions that people have. So yeah, more work to be done, but I think what is important as well is just have some degree of consistency across the market when we're looking at outcomes and what's appropriate. So I think that's something else that we just should really consider as well.
I also would say that they are really helpful, but they should be sort of tied to action. So obviously it's really important that people can, especially young people, can, you know, read the living standards and see, oh gosh, I really need to be saving more. But I think it's important that it's, you know, in that same communication, they're delivered easy ways in which they can, increase their contributions. Otherwise, I think that young people will be like, oh, that's really bad, but because it's really difficult to actually do anything about it, they might just forget about it. So yeah.
I think the pensions dashboard actually will be quite useful, because they'll be able to see all the pensions, how much pensions they really have, because that's another problem. Most people have no idea how many places they worked and what that means and how much that is and whether they'll be able to live on it even. So something, something that can compare. And I think that's what the PLSA figure does. It says, well, actually, this is what I have, but I might need this to live on. So for comparison purposes, I think it can be useful.
Great, thank you very much. I'm conscious of timing, so I think we'll bring the webinar and the Q&As to an end here. There are a few questions that we've not got around to answering yet, so we will pick up on those individually after this webinar. A very big thank you to Sharon, Khaled and Charlotte for your contribution today. It's been really, really interesting and really great, so thank you very much. And thank you everyone else for joining. As a reminder, we will be sending a short feedback survey around. If you could take the time to complete it, that would be really great. Just helps us inform what we do for future webinars. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. I hope you found today's session interesting, and have a good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.